idea how physics works within this universe, but I do believe this means I'm some sort of slug. Ladies, gentlemen, and adventurers of all ages, Enshrouded is the newest survival game to break out onto the scene, and as a baseline, let's just get it out of the way, it's fun, it feels good, it's satisfying, and rewarding. But obviously that's not enough detail by any means, so today, with a few hours in the game under my belt, we'll be going over my first impressions of this pretty sizable game, my thoughts on whether it's worth your time and attention, all that goodness. Without further ado then, let's just start at the top. At its core, Enshrouded is a beautiful mixing and marriage of two game genres, a survival game and a classic RPG. There's base building as complex as you want it to get, sure, but while this is mostly being built as a survival game with RPG elements, I would say it's a little bit backwards to how I see it. I would more label it as a sort of sandbox RPG that has base building elements. With most survival type games, you have a number of essentially self-management timers that you have to be constantly worrying about. You need to eat, you need to drink, you need to sleep, things like that are just a constant thing over your head. A constant shifting objective that you always have displayed in front of you, and in Enshrouded, the same mechanics are there, but they're sort of muted. There is a food system, there is a sleep system, but instead of killing you or making you weaker if you don't interact with them, they instead go the opposite way of every kind of food gives you different buffs, so you have a limited number of food slots, and eating these foods makes you stronger for a period of time after the fact in varying ways. Things like a cooked chicken leg will increase your maximum health, for example. Then there are also things like elixirs later on, but they follow the same concepts really. This game's survival aspects don't really punish you for ignoring them so much as they reward you for interacting with them. As well, there is a well-rested buff that you want to try and keep active, and you get this by being in a situation where you are sheltered, warm, and comfortable, meaning there's a roof above your head, you are sitting or laying down, and there's a fire nearby. And honestly, in this way, while the acquiring of food is very survival game-esque, while you do have to punch random trees and rocks to gather materials to forge your first weapons, things like that, it is all very survival game in that aspect. What I would say specifically is the mechanics that I at least personally tend to find to be more tedious busy work in a survival game are cut down massively in Enshrouded, and where they do still have those concepts, they are again built to reward you for interaction, not punish you for ignoring, and it just makes it feel more satisfying to me on a personal level to interact with the game, at least. Moving on past that, then the next major thing I want to talk about is the combat itself for the game, because it feels really good even early on. There are melee weapons in a more standard sense. There is a dodge roll that has iframes, so you can time it right to make it avoid any attack in the game, which is pretty fun. There's a shield that you can make, which lets you actively block and even parry for massive stun, because the game also has a stun gauge that builds up and things like that. There's ranged combat in the form of classic bows and arrows, of course, but there's also even magic in the early game coming in the form of two items, wands, which let you cast whatever their base spell is just pretty infinitely, and staves, which require you to find a magic scroll that has a limited number of uses to actually funnel through the staff. Essentially, you've got your standard RPG archetypes represented in an interesting way and surrounding a really strong skill-based combat system. And I always love a game with dodging and parrying and blocking that works in a way where at level 1 you could theoretically kill a super endgame enemy if you play perfectly. It would just take a lot of time, as opposed to games that make that completely impossible to do because of statistical imbalances or just an impossibility of avoidance. Past that then, we have Traversal. Early on in the game you are limited to standard human movement, but two of the early items that you are asked to craft specifically in quests is a glider, which does exactly as you'd expect, gliding a nice soft diagonal forward arc until you're out of stamina or you hit the ground, and sometimes even a little bit after you hit the ground. But then there is a grappling hook as well, and I do want to say I was actually disappointed to find out that the grappling hook can only attach to set locations in the world. It's not really freely targetable, you can't use it to climb random cliffs, only ones that the developers specifically want you to climb, which is in a way, I think, leading credence to the game being more RPG-like than survival at the end of the day. Yes, the world is open, and you can choose to just run off in a direction and explore if you want to, but it is built with a sort of progression path in mind. Ways you can clear out Shroud from different areas to make them easier to explore, to let you set up bases in them, ways to make yourself more resistant to the Shroud, things like that. And there's also a quest line that lets you unlock NPCs to bring into your base, such as a blacksmith who can fully set up shop there. On which note, we come to a mechanic that I'm not a big fan of, which is item durability. Items in this game can break quite easily, and especially early on, that can be a big detriment. Once you start getting further further in, you start finding fancier weapons with much heftier durability ratings that will actually last you as long as you need them to in the moment. But early game, especially, the first thing that you can craft is like a basic club, and it lasts an exceedingly low number of hits even against level 1 enemies. So realistically, you have to craft like 3 clubs just so you don't leave your base and wind up with an enemy in front of you with like 10 health that is just a nightmare to kill with your fists. But again, that is mostly an issue that becomes less prevalent as you get further into the game. More just a warning to people for starting off early on. Up to the point that I'm at so far, I would say the absolute start of the game then is the combat. I do like these sort of lessened punishment survival aspects. It makes it more approachable for sure, while still having them be relevant, but the combat is just so fluid and enjoyable. It's tight, the parrying feels great, the iframes on the roll feel really nice when you get them, and there's even an entire sprawling skill tree in the game that lets you essentially specialize into a class, and then you can go big smash and just get a big special massive hit against stunned enemies. You can go stealth mode and get a 10 times crit on unaware enemies, and those are just the very beginning of the skill tree. I don't even want to spoil the things that are further in for people who haven't seen it before. Things like this just let you specialize into being whatever you actually want to be in the long run. There are also, of course, bosses around the place at the end of larger groups of enemies, and in my opinion, they generally feel really good to fight. Highly damaging, but well telegraphed attacks, but of course, if you combine that concept with iframes on dodges, with a good block and parry system with the shield, or even just playing at ranged and positioning with bow and arrows or magic, it works right. It is a classic combination that feels really good in the setting of this game, and that's what matters most at the end of the day. All in all, I think this game is absolutely worth your time to check it out if you are interested in the concept. I think the promotional material for it has been pretty much on point up until now. It has that beautiful medieval aesthetic as well, and so if the trailers do look appealing to you, if you like the concept of having survival game mechanics made to incentivize you rather than punish you, if you like skill-based combat that also is fueled from how well you manage the survival aspects of the game, and just a fun, mysterious world to engage with all of it in, with that beautiful aesthetic that we mentioned, with interesting traversal, and essentially just a unique take on this genre by way of mixing two separate genres in a fresh way. This game is worth your time. The only big unfortunate thing really is, of course, the timing of it. This game comes out not even a week after the release of Pal World, and well, of course, they are completely different games, completely different themes, basic concepts and goals. They're also occupying the same sort of space. Both of them are mainly known as being survival games, and with Pal World popping off as aggressively as it has been, it means that Enshrouded is unfortunately probably going to get buried comparatively, as most people who play survival games are just too occupied to notice it right this second, which is a really big shame in my opinion. And I absolutely hope that I'm wrong on this, of course, but I've been covering video games for quite a number of years now, and this is a trend that happens all too often. In any case, hopefully Enshrouded still manages to shine through though. I think it is a genuinely very enjoyable game that deserves it, with a fresh take that deserves to be played, especially as I think this specific blend of genres could appeal to a lot of people. And even if it doesn't pop off too massively at launch exactly, hopefully it can recover as Pal World calms down a bit and people potentially move on to other games. That's pretty much it for me then, everyone. Just a roundup of my first impressions on the game from the first few hours that I have spent playing it. Overall, I really appreciate the way that they are treating the survival aspects. I think the combat is genuinely very good. It's solid and enjoyable all around. I love the way that they're mixing the survival and RPG type things together, and the skill tree is deep, the world is big and full of things to interact with or kill, and it fully gives you the option of treating it exclusively as a dungeon delving game if you want to, or exclusively as a survival based builder. But of course, the optimal experience you will have with this game will be for someone who wants to mix both of these together and get the most out of what the game has to offer. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.